Welcome everyone to Heart Talk, coming to you live from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah in Malaysia. I just would love your company. Thank you for dropping in. And I just want to remind you that we go live every Wednesday and every Friday at 1 p.m. Now, these live talks are heart-to-heart conversations that I have with invited guests. They are very inspirational in their life story. And I want you to be able to have your lunch and join me as I continue to have conversations on real-life issues that matter to the heart. We're talking about finance, we are talking about health, we are talking about spiritual living. And at the end of the day, we want to live the full life. And so these are the Heart Talk conversations that I have. And so if this is the first time that you're dropping in and Heart Talk with Dr. Charles Lee, please subscribe the button because I'd love your company every Wednesday and every Friday. Now, at the same time, you can get us on Facebook, Heart Talk with Dr. Charles Lee. You can get us on Instagram, Heart Talk with Dr. Charles Lee. We're everywhere except with you. So today, let's talk. And I want us to enjoy this session because I have a very special guest. She comes from a space that many of us don't visit very often. And I'm talking about a lady by the name of Sandhya Suri. And let me just start off by reading this. Sandhya comes from Delhi, NCR area in India. She's a change enabler. She's 3 times TEDx speaker. She's an inspirational thought and motivational speaker. She's a life and performance enhancement consultant. She's a communicator. She's an author. She's a poet. And most important of all, she's a Navy veteran. And for your information, she served on a warship. And I'm not sure whether she got all those characters within her from that time at sea. But at the same time today, she's currently focused on sharing life narratives for inspirational transformation. Her experiences and credentials can fill a suitcase. But suffice for me to say this. Art is meditative to Sandhya. Travel is a school. And writing is her breathing. Then wait till we find out what the unusual means to her. So join me to welcome Lieutenant Sandhya Suri to join us on Heart Talk. Welcome, Sandhya.
Hi, good day to you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are. Thank you, Dr. Charles, so much for having me here.
My pleasure, and it's great for you to give us your time. There's so much that we can have a lunchtime talk with you, and I know it'll go on to tea and dinner and until the early hours of the morning because we can never get enough of Sandhya Suri. But Sandhya, I sourced you out on LinkedIn, okay? And I was going through all the, the different people and the professionals and all that. And I was reading your biodata. And it's the second line that caught my attention when you said, it's the unusual that excites me. And so I sort of sat back and I said, now, this one I want to meet. I said, this is one personality. I'm not sure from which planet she comes from, but definitely, it's definitely someone I want to meet. And so as we go into this whole space, of being in the unusual. Let me just say these words written by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. He said these words. He said, between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. And so when I got onto LinkedIn and I read right up there on your banner, these are the words. If you weren't judged ever, would you be kinder or run wild? If you weren't compelled to hate, would you hate at all? And so these are 2 words that struck me, that this is something unusual. You don't get that kind of headlines when you look at any banner so far I've had in LinkedIn. And I thought that these 2 words, judgment and hate, why is this Lieutenant Sandhya Suri put this right out there unless she has been in that zone where these 2 words meant to her. So let's start from there. Give us an introduction about yourself and where you are, and let's just enjoy the moment with you.
Hi, the thing is, I'll just jump right in because telling people who I am is very difficult.
Yeah.
I usually say I am, and I stopped right there. So because it seems to be one of the longest, journeys in that statement, I am. It's also the shortest sentence in the English language, for that matter. So, in terms of why that banner is up, is because it's one of the toughest things to learn is to not judge and also to not hate. Hate also expends a lot of energy, whether you like it or not. I had this entire, discussion with somebody a couple of years back about hate being a positive emotion. I said it's a positive emotion, and they said, no, that's negative. So you see, when you're talking about hate as a positive emotion, I was referring to the fact that when you hate something, you are expending energy. It is occupying space in your mind. It's occupying space in your life. If you're indifferent, that's another spot. That's a good spot to be in. That means you don't let something affect you so much. And I was going through my own, growing up. I've always been growing up. I'm still evolving. I haven't reached that space yet. You know what you were referring to in terms of the space between the stimulus and the reaction, right? I am very reactive, plainly because I am a visceral person. I feel everything. So there's a quote that says, it's both a blessing and a curse to feel something so deeply. So I kind of oscillate between these two things. When I feel something deeply, sometimes it's an absolute blessing. And sometimes I feel, oh, I really wish I didn't feel it so. But it takes me to a place of discovering myself as well. So it's a learning space. So the biggest, hardest learning space that we can ever be in, I think, is a space of judgment. We judge all the time. I try not to. I am still trying, and I hope somebody who has been able to do that, to not judge. I would love to learn how to, but I don't think we just learn it from other people. It's something that you have to experience. It's your journey. It's like moving through darkness, and ensuring that the light is not something that you only see and look out for outside you, but also inside you. So a lot of the hatred part comes from being compelled, being raised in conditioned spaces of saying your religion is the best, or your country is the best, your species, your caste, your color. It's ridiculous because we don't really decide where we are born. But see the beauty of it, wherever you go, your religion eventually is automatically the best for you. But I don't think it's a matter of something that has to be conditioned. It's more about learning to not condition ourselves anymore to these things and getting a step ahead of it. It's not a race, it's an experiential journey. So that is what happened to me a couple of years ago. And I was thinking, and I write when I feel like. When it comes to me, I just write. I don't even plan how the stuff that I write, by the way. It's very chaotic in my head. And if I'm able to put it into words, I do it. And that's how that little banner is there, which talks about it, because I was questioning the legitimacy of judgment and the legitimacy of hatred by itself. And there was a lot of upheaval going on around the world, including my own country, where we were, I think, being conditioned to hate more, to not accept, to have sides, to have to choose sides. So it's for example, if I say, hey, I don't like this particular ideology, it doesn't automatically mean I'm accepting the other one. But the assumption is always there. So to be able to, bypass this, and in that entire banner, it's more a space of mindfulness that I was talking about.
Right.
To get more mindful, more empathetic, have more compassion, have more kindness, because you know what, the whole world has existed for this long with a lot of hatred, a lot of strife, and a lot of running after power and money and control. I don't think it's done a great job. Let's just flip it, and let's just be kinder, be more compassionate, and see how it works. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I know, because well, that's what I thought, that because everything is about judgment today,
It is.
And it's interesting you mentioned the word mindfulness, because that's very much in my passion and my calling. That the two M's, the M&M that we buy with the yellow packet and it's got chocolate in it, that sugar kills. But this M&M that I talk about gives life, which is
So,
mindfulness,
what is the other M for you?
manifestation.
Wonderful.
You see, because you can have it in your mind, but if you don't manifest it through your heart and live it out, you have not got that full life. There's no formula there. You need both. You need brain talk and heart talk.
I would put it as mirroring mindfulness. So, you
Very
keep
mindful.
mirroring when you see it,
That's
mirror
right.
it. That's
That's
how
right.
it becomes a habit then.
Yeah, but it's got to be applied, and that's where the fruit
Yeah,
comes out.
it
That's the
does.
manifestation of the fruit of life. And so much of mindfulness that you talk about um, is non-judgmental. You get into the present moment, and then you're not supposed to judge what's around you, but just be very mindful of that very present moment. That's a tough call.
It's very
And,
tough.
and if you ask all these mindfulness gurus, they always quote this non-judgmental state of mind. You see, and so I'm not sure how you handle it, but we live in that. You know, if you talk to my children now, let's just move from judgment and hatred to change enabler, which is your mantra, your calling. Because to change, to me, is taking a lifetime. If you meet my children, they will tell you right now, Sanya, Auntie, he hasn't changed at all. You know, and yet you hear people talking about change is a constant. So how do you measure up both on the same balanced scale where change is a constant and yet you're supposed to be changing as an enabler? Because you know, there's so many situations you and I face where you can't change the situation. The only thing you can do is change yourself and adapt to that situation. So talk to us about that as a change enabler. What made you get into that niche that you feel today you're such a catalyst to transforming lives and seeing
Ah,
the fruit coming out? That's important for us.
you have used a very specific word called catalyst, and that is the category I'm literally at in terms of change enabling. You know, when we define change enabling in professional terms, it may mean absolutely different. Okay. I use language very differently in terms of they are the same words, right? Unless I create a word, and that's just not
Right.
happening right now, at least not today. But what happens here is change enabling can come in very structured manner. I don't work on that. Someone else is doing it. It's their job. I'm not touching that. For me, change enabling is more about creating that space where I can show people that there are other windows that exist. There are also other people who have gone through this, but it does not necessarily mean that that size will fit everyone.
Right.
One size cannot fit all, right? So if you're talking about enabling change or transformation, that transformation has to come from the person themselves, from within. Otherwise, it doesn't stay. It doesn't linger. It doesn't linger long enough to transform. So when I'm talking about enablement, enablement is to let a person be in that space where they can see the same view in a different perspective. But the decision, the choice to take that step into wherever they wish to go is theirs. It's not mine. I cannot call myself a mentor all the time, for example. I'm just a person who opens up those windows and lets you see the world a little differently, but it's still your mind seeing it. You see, even if I open windows, your mind has to see it, your mind has to resonate, your mind has to have a hook to it, right? So, whatever I speak, not everybody is going to get hooked. I accept that. Not everyone is going to transform the way I would want them transformed. But then why should I want them transformed in a certain manner? That's not my call to make, it's their call.
Right.
So that is the freedom of choice, the freedom of choosing what to do with what I'm placing on the table is yours. And that is how the catalyst, what you're talking about, it works in a manner, in the manner in which you are accepting it. So
Yeah.
I am only putting it out into the world. It's like air. It's like a fragrance. Somebody likes it, someone doesn't like it. It doesn't make it good, bad, ugly. That's the space of judgment. But something that can help you out with it, if it does, that enables change, that lets you evolve. And I'm still learning. So I learn from every communication, every interaction I have with people, and I hope to God they do as well.
Well, that's
That's
that.
all
Yeah,
I know for.
that's beautifully said. And so, if you were to have five people in the room, who would be your ideal client? That when you walk into that room and you are already premeditated a thought that I want a life change because I've gone through so much in my own life, kind of thing. Who is the most receptive person that you think they are talking to? Because I can talk to a lecture to doctors. I know who's going to take the knife and become a plastic surgeon, and who doesn't have the aptitude at all to take the stress. You know what I mean? So, as somebody coming from your position now, having gone through life, who would be an ideal? Because there are people listening, and they want to change. I want to change myself. But I know that there are certain areas in my life that just don't want to change. It's just pure procrastination. You call it indifference, put a name tag to it. It's just in the gene.
So I think the kind of five kind of people that I would probably think would be my audiences, people who want to make a difference to
Right.
create a better world. That's one. That's one. People with courage. And why I say courage is, if you recall what I shared on LinkedIn early this morning, you know, every person can contribute to make a better world. And
Right.
that does not require money or immense wealth of something that shows up in figures in your bank account. It requires empathy. It requires mindfulness. It requires courage. So courage is something that's very important, because you don't need courage to hate. It comes so easily. It just comes like that. Anger comes easily. Temper comes easily. But it takes courage to love. So people who want to love and who believe in love, which is more cosmic in its approach, and want to know how to share it, that I cannot create the how all the time. I just create spaces in which it can be enabled, right?
Right.
So that is the thing. So people who are, the third is people who are eager to discover their truths and their inner journeys about their inner selves. So these are again people also who need a lot of courage. When you pray to discover your truth and your inner self, you have to pray for a lot of courage as well, because there are certain truths you won't like. Admitting to a mistake, admitting to you messed up. So admitting it, yes, that was what happened. I resent what happened to me, but I also messed up. So that requires courage to acknowledge, even to yourself. And that's the hardest one ever. And to be able to acknowledge that in front of other people is a step further, right? So you need that. And the universe has your back. What we need to do is we have to allow it to unfold. We have to persist in the unfolding. You have to have patience with yourself.
Right.
And, all of this requires a certain degree of honesty, a certain degree of, not letting the worst in the world get to you in a manner that the world expects it,
Right.
but you have to save it for yourself and use it for your own growth and evolution.
Well, that's powerful. When you talk about courage, I think of one of the greatest men that ever lived, and he had his own space, which was an unusual space in his clothing, in his attire, in what he stood for, was Mahatma Gandhi. And he had the courage to go against the whole dynasty of colonialism at that time in history, and all he did was showcase himself, and he was unusual in his own way, but he made a big difference in life, to everyone till today. And I think that's where does vulnerability come in when you talk about change? And to me, it's like openness is a big thing, isn't it, Sanya?
Yeah. So you see, vulnerability, we feel that we are putting ourselves, exposing ourselves a lot when we share our truths, when we share what has happened with us. Even when, for example, survivors who share their stories, It takes a lot of courage. It took me a lot of time to share my story. So it's out there somewhere, it has been covered. But the whole point of it is I realized in my 20s that after going through a very, very bad relationship, that I couldn't, I cannot handle abuse, I cannot handle uh, blackmail, emotional blackmail, entrapment without actually letting myself out in the open and exposing myself to that space of saying, all right, do what you want, I'll deal with it. You see, that is a risk taker. When you're taking a risk of putting yourself on the line and being exposed for things that you are what the world considers as not acceptable. Oh my God, you should be ashamed of yourself and all that. When you're ready to expose your shame to the world, people can't blackmail you for it anymore.
Right.
Cannot get blackmailed. You cannot be emotionally blackmailed. You cannot be entrapped. You cannot be put into a corner. So here's a mental exercise I do when people try to do that. When you're trying to corner me into uh, a space, it's basically a rectangle or a square. That's a space. That's why you're getting cornered. And when that happens mentally, I tell myself I am in a round room. There are no corners, and that's how my mind works differently there. So that's how I kind of deal with it. I don't know how you can deal with it. Everybody's got their own technique, and it's all valid, by the way.
That's right. I think that's a step in your life where you see a lot of us, including myself, because as a doctor, we're not exposed to any other inroads in life. We just go to the operating theater, finish your work, go to the ward, back home. Hardly have any friends. If you ask my family, they will say I can count his friends, maybe one if they're still alive. But Sanya, where I'm hearing you from, would you agree with me that, I mean, at least for me, we wear masks. We all got masks in front of us. There's a mask at home, there's a mask at work, and all that. To take that mask off and be vulnerable, to me, is the greatest change enabler, isn't it?
It is. It is.
You know,
It's painful too. You
right,
see, it's painful too. And the finest example of that is with an onion. When you start peeling an onion, it has layers. But what it does also is it tears you up. You are going to cry, right? It's giving you discomfort. So as you start peeling off the layers of who you are as a person or who you're projecting yourself to be, it will make you uncomfortable. It will also make others around you uncomfortable. Say, stop peeling that or stop cutting onion in front of me. You get it? It's a great example of what happens in real life. If what I say or do, if my honesty is going to make you uncomfortable, they don't want it. They want it measured in honeyed words, and I have to make life comfortable for other people all the time. But when you do that, it diminishes your truth.
right.
It diminishes your truth, especially when you're saying something. So when somebody says, "Hey, I want to hear the truth. I don't care where it's coming from," you have to have courage to listen and to be still about it, right? So don't ask me because I am going to give it exactly the way it is. And
Right.
here's the
Spade is a
funny thing
spade. Yeah.
about it. The funny thing about it is with women and men, or let me include the other genders on the women's side. When we are expressing ourselves, we've been conditioned to accommodate and make other people feel comfortable. So we don't use the language or the communication that men use. When men speak to me the way they are speaking to me, and I speak right back exactly the way they are speaking to me, they get very uncomfortable. They think I have an attitude and I am being rude. And I say, hey, let's just put what you said in the woman's voice and hear it again with the exact same connotations and impressions. No, it was the same. If I could turn this exact same thing into a male voice, you would accept it.
Right.
And therein lies the whole crux of communication, how we communicate and how it's construed to be.
Yeah, it's a
I know I digressed because this is like,
no. But I think that's that's Sanya speaking,
yeah,
and
that's me.
yeah, period. And when you look back in your own life, share with
Mm,
us some of those turning points that you can offhand just remember those moments or those incidences where you realize that's it. You mentioned one or two just now in your own life,
mm.
but
Yeah,
as you
yeah.
go on and until recently, some of those turning points that have been so challenging that it's not you. It's like when my daughter came back from overseas, Sanya, and I had spent 5 years of my life just working and working to see her finish, and then I realized that my time had gone, and I was just getting into my 70s. In the next 2 months, I'll be 70, and I told the family I'm leaving the house. I'm going out. But they couldn't register why is dad leaving and going on. But I said, I just want to spend some time with myself, and I can tell you it's a very, very scary, frightening spot to be when you
Yes.
realize that time is no more. Time is like what you say. What are your thoughts on time? And we all got these 2 days, as one of my mentors always talk about, today and that day when you meet your creator. you know and yeah, so talk to us some of those turning points in your life that
So I'm going to add these things together, piece together into people wondering why I'm driven to seek unusual and the unique, right? Which is what we started with. And a lot of people, a lot of my family members, and some friends as well. Most of my friends get me. My family members don't get me, except probably my daughter. Uh, they normally ask me, why can't you simply work on a regular job like anyone else, and have a peaceful, comfortable life? And I have asked myself this question so many times. But then when I picture, there's this routine in my head of being dull, compromising, adjusting, and just doing the routine things over and over again, I admire it in people who are happy with it and comfortable with it. I'm not. So that's who I am, right? So turning points in my life, when I'm looking back at the point of time when um way back in college, I was offered to join a political party as a youth, you know, president. I turned it down. I would have probably been in political career. It was a turning point, and I'm grateful I turned it down because I don't think I would have even, because one, I didn't believe in that ideology. So if I had joined just for my own sake or for gaining something out of it, I would have been living a lie. So I turned that down. The next turning point in my life was my marriage, my first marriage. And I remember walking to the place where we had to be married and telling myself, run, just run, don't get married.
okay.
I should have, I did
uh,
not. So that was the other turning point, which just changed my life completely. And
okay, let me
that,
pause there. What that running away from yourself, um
it
that's a
wasn't running away from myself, really, was it?
I mean, you're running far away from a situation that was happening
Yeah,
to you,
yeah, yeah.
but you allowed yourself to get into that situation. You see,
Yes,
so many times this happens to us. We allow ourselves in a situation, and
yeah.
deep down we are telling ourselves, don't get in there, don't go into that space.
So how I got myself into that situation was that when I was on a rebound from a really bad relationship, did not want to get married at all. My mother was pressurizing me. I'm not going to blame it on my mother, but just a statement she made. She told me, I'm sending you a few pictures, so you pick up the one you want. And I'm like, I am not interested. So she said, okay, if somebody asks, don't say no. So the first guy who asked me, I answered back, who's saying no? Because I didn't care. Okay. I think I messed up, and I messed up big time by accepting, to get into it. I still had time to say no because I was not engaged at the point. I got engaged. I still had time. I did not move back from it. I wish I had, but then you know what? If I am where I am today, because of whatever I've done, I'm still all right. So I'm going to put that into perspective, but that's all in retrospect, right?
Right.
And I remember why I couldn't run away from it. I was very conditioned into believing once you give your word, you shouldn't back up.
Right.
And that conditioning for women in India is very, very high. We get conditioned, because it's all about, oh my God, what's going to happen to the family? The family will be in shame, their honor will be questioned, and that is the pressure. And let me tell you, I have never admitted this mess up in my life in public ever. It's the
Right.
first time. But that was a mess up again. But then the other turning points in my life came when I decided to come back from Nigeria because there was a family crisis. And that decision transformed my life in two ways. One, I lost all my money. Number two, I became wealthier.
Okay.
I became wealthy in the kind of transformation it brought to my life, in the kind of lessons I learned, in the journey it took me to be on my own. In the journey it took me to realize how people are, what pushes them to do things, what has pushed me to do certain things in my life, and how it has helped me empathize with other people in the same situation. And on this note, I am so grateful to my friends who helped me out, to family members who helped me out, and to those who did not understand me because they pushed me on to understand myself first. To people who ran on me, who stepped on my shoulders to climb because they taught me also, as much as the people who have had my back all these years. And I cannot walk away from this without gratitude.
Right. That's your fuel. Uh,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And and hearing you, Sandhya, thank you for sharing something so personal to us with us. Has that have those turning points made you become fiercely independent?
Oh yeah.
You see, and but it's a
I
lonely space. You talk about this space being lonely because sometimes when you
no
come, no,
no. Okay, it was a lonely space at the beginning when you're learning things, when you're discovering yourself.
okay,
Uh, you always feel that how people talk about uh, you must have a companion with you. That's the norm. But then I'm in that unusual space now, right? So I don't think I measure companionship the way people measure it, right? So to come to the space, I had to go through the lonely space. Loneliness, the thing with loneliness is you are still dependent on others to fulfill, to overcome that loneliness. But then when you come to that space of trying to get used to that loneliness and doing something with it, you can also emerge into a space of aloneness.
ah,
And aloneness is very different from loneliness. Aloneness is where you start to like yourself, where you love who you're becoming, where you're discovering things on a daily basis. You're learning every 10 seconds, literally. Applying what you learn can come differently to people, but it evolves you either way. You cannot unhear things, you cannot unsee things, you cannot reverse back time. So the time that you spend being alone, and if you're comfortable in your aloneness, you are in the best space ever to transform yourself.
so, friends, that was part one of my discussion and conversation with Sandhya Suri. We're going to take this up on part two, and part two will be even deeper still, because we'll be talking about why is the upside in her life always being positive. When you go into that aloneness space, there's only one thing that can happen, and that is upwards. It's always whenever we have a different situation and we encounter life differently, we always have these negative, connotations surrounding us at times. But when you are in a space of your own and you own yourself, you own your journey, you are in the driving seat. There's only one place that can happen, and that is going up, the upside of life. And so in part 2, we will talk about what it is to be a positive minded person, always optimistic about all situations in life, what it is to be kind to oneself, what it is to be curious. Curiosity fuels, the unusual space. And we shall talk about boundaries, and finally we should end up in her trademark, and that is when writing is her breathing, what poetry is in motion to her. So join us back again when we do part 2, which will be very soon. Until then, I want to say thank you very much for joining us on Heart Talk. Remember that it's the heart that talks and it's the brain that thinks. And when you have brain talk and heart talk, there's only one thing can happen, and that is a conversation about life, the abundance of life. So thank you once again, and we'll see you next time on Heart Talk. Bye for now, and we'll talk again soon.